Evening, everyone. Okay, it's 5:15 and I'd like to call our board meeting for October the 4th to order at 5:15 p.m. Welcome to everybody attending in person and watching via YouTube live stream. One or more board members or members of the public body may participate by telephone, video, or internet conferencing. We'll begin with our tribute this evening. In partnerships with the tribes who called Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge and respect the land our schools are built on. We commit to being a strong partner with any and all tribal nations who entrust their children to our schools. We are grateful and honored to be partners. Just to clarify, comment cards are over here on, I guess, the north side of the wall over here. And then they can be given to Dr. Hagigat, and they'll be given to the board to address at public, at the community communications section. So with that, may we please have a roll call for attendance for the board members. Ms. Miriam.
Carmen Trujillo,
Here.
Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Reggie Carrillo,
Here.
Alicia Vink,
Here.
Laura Diaz.
With that, we do have 4 board members here. We have a quorum present, so we will proceed. May we please have the Pledge of Allegiance? Ms. Jeffries.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jeffries. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Dr. Davila Hagigat, do we have any recommendations for our agenda this evening?
We recommend that we adopt the agenda as it stands.
Wonderful. Do we have a motion to adopt our agenda as presented?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
Thank you.
Alicia Vink, I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, may we please have a roll call vote, Ms. Miriam?
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink,
Aye.
Laura Diaz.
Thank you. With that, our motion does pass, and we will move on to awards, recognitions, and announcements. Our first one is the district is thrilled to once again work with Dr. Carol Poor and the Phoenix Fabulous Mural Project. Currently, Arizona murals are displayed in the boardroom representing the past, present, and future of Phoenix. Dr. Poor and a team of artists are now working with 4th grade students throughout the district on a new project called The Great Pivot. As part of the Arizona History Unit, students think through changes we have experienced from 2020 through today using connections from the pandemic, social justice, and the downtown building boom. They engage in brainstorming around what 2020 did to reshape our lives and community. And imagine how this may change the future. Students write short stories or poems and culminate the project with a visit to Emerson Court to work with artists to create a mural based on their short stories. The murals are then given to each school to be displayed on campus. We are excited to work with Dr. Poor and the artists to provide our students with a unique learning opportunity focused on Arizona history and art.
Yay. The Arizona Office of Indian Education and the Office of Academic Standards, in collaboration with the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center, provided a free professional learning opportunity for Phoenix #1 employees focused on cultural responsive education approaches with Indigenous students in Arizona. The professional development helps our staff to better understand the history and impact boarding schools have on our Native American families and students, as well as build our capacity for being culturally responsive with our educational approaches. We appreciate collaborating with the Arizona Department of Education and offering this PD to our staff. Yay.
Garfield's kindergarten students recently learned about fruits and seeds. Students participated in a read aloud of A Fruit is a Suitcase for Seeds by Jean Richards, and the garden team then revealed real seeds. Students also got to taste strawberries and the American striped cucumbers fresh from Garfield's garden. Through their learning, they concluded that all fruits must have seeds. Hey.
On Friday, September 16th, Brophy students visited Dunbar School for their Brophy College Prep Frosh/Big Brother Day. They played games and interacted with our first and second grade dragons. The boys helped students with conflict management and worked on the concept of sharing and taking turns. They also helped beautify the campus and played an open gym after school with our middle school students. It was a great day.
On Thursday, September 22nd, Herrera School for the Fine Arts and Dual Language rededicated their community-sponsored healing garden. In partnership with Centon Milpan Cultural Revitalization Project of Tonatiera, the event consisted of planting corn and marigolds in preparation for the first day of the fall equinox. Mr. Carrillo, can you pronounce that marigold word for us?
Cempasúchil.
Cempasúchil. That's beautiful. Thanks, guys. Yay.
Phoenix #1 appreciates our families partnering with our schools, and our sites have hosted a number of family engagement opportunities. On Wednesday, September 28th, in partnership with Courtesy Automotive Group, the Phoenix Police Cool Treats One van visited Emerson School to build positive relationships with the community. Students received icy treats while getting to meet police officers. Second and third grade students from Kenilworth visited the Burton Bar Public Library to celebrate the start of the academic year and the school's Move On When Ready focus with a special June B. Jones themed Literacy Day. The visit encouraged students to expand their love of literature, and each student received their own copy of a Junie B. Jones favorite. Yay.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we will move on to item B, our superintendent's report.
I also get to celebrate our partnership with Courtesy Chevrolet and the Phoenix Police. We really appreciate our ability to have those relationships built at that level. And I did enjoy myself one of the strawberry popsicles, so it was very yummy. So thank you to our partnerships. I want to take a moment to address the transition of Dunbar 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to Magnet Traditional. During my visit to Magnet Middle School classrooms last Friday, I quickly noticed that I could not tell the difference between students from Dunbar and Magnet in the middle school classrooms that I visited. They just really made this community of learners. And so all students were interacting in a respectful manner. I did connect with the teachers, and I know this was something that was brought up as part of our meeting on Friday. And when I connected with our teachers, they shared their experience with the transition, and one of the teachers shared with me that time would give students the opportunity to learn routines and expectations. Another teacher did say that she needed a consistent instructional aid, and that would be very helpful. So I spoke to Mr. Walker, and he had already shared with me that they had somebody hired that was going to start this week. So I look forward to learning more about that. And I connected with him about other supports, and he's made some suggestions that we're already working on to make sure that we support that transition. So I want to reassure the parents that Magnet continues to have high expectations for all students with adequate support. We are working with parents on a case-by-case basis to meet individual student needs as they arise during this transition, and we will continue to monitor the transition and provide those needed supports. Lastly, we continue to balance social, emotional, and academic needs. Today, site leaders from across our district and other leaders from within our organization engaged in resilience, empowerment, professional development. And as the district, we are committed to better understand trauma and engage in practices that are healing in nature. Our goal is to build capacity where all of our adults are in a position to address student needs, knowing that at times students and staff behaviors are connected, or they really need to be connected with those past experiences so we can understand those behaviors. Hats off to Ms. Dawn Baumgartner, our lead social worker, and Dr. Seth Alshire, our coordinator for student success, for leading this work. Thank you.
Great news. Thank you very much, Dr. Davila Hagiga. With that, we will move on to item C. Any board reports to share? I know we had some visits to schools this week.
I did visit the Herrera rededication ceremony, led by Dona Tierra, and who's leading that is, Tupac. That was an amazing event. So thank you to our Herrera principals, and assistant principal, Dr. Sotelo, for just, especially for that community, bringing in relevant partnerships, that provide relevant learning opportunities connected to their garden spaces for their student population that they serve in South Central Phoenix. And just going to that event, it just is, it's a learning space for students, but it's also something that bridges their learning to their own culture. Having that garden and rededicating it to the ancestors of this land. It's just a reminder of whose land we are on and the students that we serve and how we need to continue building those bridges to our community. And I'm excited to see, as you know, maize, corn is a staple in indigenous and Latin culture. And I'm excited, that's what they planted at Herrera. So I'm excited to see what the garden looks once all that is grown. Cempasúchil is marigold. It says fall equinox, but it's in preparation for the holidays, upcoming holidays, Day of the Dead, posadas that are happening around New Year, and so all of that will be prepared for like tamales, recipes like that. So it's exciting. If you haven't visited, especially you're at a school site where maybe your garden is not, there's potential to do more. I urge you to visit Garfield, Herrera, and connect with any resources that we have to build up your garden. But that was an awesome opportunity. So thanks for the invite, Dr. Sotelo and Principal Ardon.
I was able to visit Bethune this past week, and I'm just very grateful for Principal Sells allowing me to visit. I got the name right? Okay, she looked at me. Allowing me to visit her campus and being able to see our students engaged and learning, and our staff feeling supported there under her new leadership. It seems like it's been a pretty seamless transition. So thank you to the Bethune community for welcoming me.
Good. With that, we will move. Thank you, both of you, for sharing. Let's move on to item D, community communications. Ms. Miriam, do we have any emails this evening?
We do not.
All right. We will move forward with our comment cards. Let's circle back here. Okay, this is the time for public, for the public to go ahead and comment and address the board. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically on the agenda. So with that said, may we please have Miss Mary Ellen Pearson Phillip. We will do the usual 3 minutes to accommodate everyone. And we're really glad you're here. Come on up. Thank you for being here.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for answering my questions, although I feel that it wasn't as specific as I would have liked them to be. But I guess at this time, that's impossible. I'm going to keep watching to see if, how the students at Dunbar are being serviced, because I think that they really need a lot of support, very much support. In conjunction with what Dr. H said, I talked to my granddaughter and she did say that the children are transitioning well in there. She's made a lot of friends with the kids from Dunbar, which is good. But I'm still very, very disappointed in how this was done. And the very fact that, students have never been moved ever in the district in the past 40 years, never. And I don't understand that, but, I guess it wasn't my decision to make. I wouldn't have made it. That's not what's best for kids. And I understand that we're a declining enrollment, but then I also understand that we have a teacher shortage, which the both really don't seem to, I was given that as an answer that we were declining enrollment, although we have a teacher shortage, which it should even out, but I guess it didn't. So that's really all I have to say. I'm just really discouraged. What we signed up for at Magnet with low classroom size is not what we have right now. And I hope that the academic expectations with our children, because of the load the teacher has, still remains the expectation that was before and continues with our grandchildren and our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jason Parsons, please come on up. Thank you for being here.
Hi, you all know me. This is my fourth time doing this. And the first 3 times I was very optimistic, having a vision for improving the quality of the education of my fellow autistics at Emerson School. And right now I'm extremely discouraged. I laid out a plan for recruiting IAs, directly from the autism community, not only parents and other relatives, but autistics themselves. And although I had a short discussion with what's her name, who isn't here tonight, it was nothing more than just a short discussion. So then I find out, last week that the game plan is to continue to do what you've always done, which is to sign up another staffing agency, not realizing that IAs aren't loyal to a staffing agency. IAs find out about their jobs through the same job site. So this is not going to lead to more IAs. Okay, it's that simple. And like I explained to, what's her name, right now the well has been poisoned. Okay, because the fact that, we hired, we hired these people on for IAs and as paraprofessionals. Okay, and the paraprofessional training that they get that's state mandated, is for those working in a resource room. There is no autism relevant training for these IAs unless that the contracting company, because there's one contracting company that I'm aware of that actually does more training, because they do other stuff other than provide IAs. And so basically we haven't solved the problem, and things are getting worse, and right now one of the autistics that I work with is viewed as a menace to the school, because right now I would estimate that 2/3 of the individuals that work directly with the autistics, including at least 2 means they have college degrees, certified employees, okay, know nothing about autism, and they don't want to learn about autism. They care nothing about autism. And so I'm trying to get you to authorize me to go and reach out to a community that understands autism, because right now, yes, my fellow autistics are in a hostile learning environment, resulting in them exhibiting behaviors that creates a hostile learning environment for the gen ed students. Okay, now we need to stop doing what we've been doing because it doesn't work. It's led to a critical shortage of IAs that is not going to be replenished by doing what we've always done. And start working with people who actually understand autism, who have committed their lives to helping individuals with autism of all ages. Okay, you know, we need to get our act together.
Thank you, Mr. Carson.
May we please call Ms. Tony Rodriguez up?
Good evening, Madam President, Board, Superintendent. I'm here to speak on behalf of the temporary boundary change for Magnet and Dunbar. I'm not speaking against it. The bottom line is that I understand the circumstances under which it was brought about, and I would not want anyone's child not to have the chance of the quality education that my child has at Magnet. But I am also here to speak in reference to the way it was handled. First of all, Magnet has been around a long time. I myself am an adoptive mother, and so when I started looking for a place for my child to go to school, I zeroed in on Magnet. I understood that it was a school of choice, and there would be certain things that I would have to sacrifice as far as my time and my commitment for my child's success. And I was willing to do that and did do that. I was very disappointed when I found out that this change was going to happen. 71 students being added to the student body, and I don't know about anybody else, but I never got a letter. I never received an email. All I heard was my child telling me that on Monday, 71 or new kids would be added to her class. Her class number has gone from 19 to 31. This is not really a problem as long as this board and the superintendent has taken into consideration what will be needed to help those children succeed. The bottom line is children meet their expectations. And so I have no concern about the children at Dunbar. I believe that given the proper support, that they can achieve success. But the children at Magnet also need to be able to maintain their current standard of success. Magnet has been around and it is a primarily minority school, and many of the graduates have gone on to be very successful in the community. And there are many generations of family there. I would like to speak to the point that this needs to be monitored, and it needs to be, the quality of the education needs to be maintained. And that I would hope that this board and the superintendent would do whatever is necessary for that to happen. I would also like to speak to the fact that we parents need to be participants. I think I understand time's up. I'm almost done. I believe that it's not possible for us to have success when you keep the parents in the dark. It's not like you don't tell me and I'm not going to say something. I will find out and I will say something. And I will continue to monitor this as well as work with the rest of the parents at the school to make sure that this is successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone. May we please call Kimberly Vital up?
Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by piggybacking off of what Tony said. There's actually a parent rights handbook on the Arizona Department of Education website, which encourages parent involvement, which encourages that positive communication between teachers, students, staff, and all of the above. I was able to join virtually Friday's meeting. And what I anticipated was not what I heard. I was present on Tuesday's meeting to share my concerns. Those concerns weren't brought up in the study session. 0 to no concerns were brought up that Magnet family shared at Tuesday's meeting. So my question is, how did you guys successfully perform a study session with misled information? Okay, I was learned by my daughter as well that their class size grew to 38. I did get a letter home on the 13th that said to welcome Dunbar students due to staff shortage. It never said the entirety of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. It never mentioned anything about the siblings. And again, piggybacking what everybody said, where do we accommodate for that influx? How is it fair to Magnet or Dunbar to have to just over the weekend assume the position and take everything in and still be held to those standards? Where is the support for the influx in IEP services or the outside of music class being supported with mental awareness? I don't think anything's been added besides a social worker. And then I heard you guys question our principal. Well, what resources do you need? Was that not investigated during the entirety of figuring out what the plan was going to be? It almost seems that this is a plan and we're just going to follow formalities to go ahead and roll this out. And I heard a repeat of how Dunbar was informed in a meeting and a meeting and a meeting. And like I said, we got a letter home Tuesday before the Monday. So my concern is IEP services, the influx in class. There has been no additional staff that I know of besides social worker. The fact that we held a public meeting to share our concerns, and those concerns based off of Magnet parents was not brought upon in the study session. In entirety, it falls at the head. If the district can't support its schools and its staff members, the staff members don't feel supported. And in turn, you wind up with 3 resignations at one school for whatever reason that was. I myself went to Phoenix Elementary. That's why I chose Magnet for my kids. I went to Magnet when it was a cottage. And at this point, I feel that if this is something that's going to happen, what else is going to continue to happen within the district that we have no control over? And I feel that everything that has been involved in this entirety of this study session, the temporary boundary changes, a lot of parents have been silenced, and that's just fair to everybody involved. And the district ultimately failed.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, Ms. Kimberly. May we please call Natasha up? Natasha Shimp. I hope I said that correctly. If not, please let me know.
Well, I'm new at this. We moved from the Osborne School District. My son had access to a reading program called Amira. It screens for dyslexia. It's a type of tool where the kid could read to the computer out loud and the computer highlights the words he can't pronounce right in red. The virtual tutor then goes through and helps the child pronounce the words. And I was told by the company that provides the software that a Sherry Nebs passed on the grant that would give all kids access to this tool. They have this tool until June of 2023. After that, it's $20 a license. So I'm really wanting to know why this federal grant is being passed. I thought the governor passed a bill that all schools should have access to a tool to help kids with dyslexia. I just came from a parent-teacher conference, and to the women that spoke up here about parents having visibility of information, I have the blessing to volunteer in my son's math class for 2 hours once a week. He knows addition and subtraction. He's in 4th grade. He gets 100% on his tests, but he has a C on his report card. How does this happen to a very active, involved parent? There's zero communication at Emerson, zero. These kids in 4th grade do not have access to the same tools that they have in the classroom. A lot of kids are at a 1st grade math level. That's unacceptable. These kids need tools at home. Now it's up to the student and the parent if the kid does the tools at home, but they need these tools. And I guarantee you there's going to be some withdrawals and teachers resigning because now they're combining 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And there's been zero communication that goes out. I have the schedule. The schedule doesn't mean anything. Is my son going to continue addition and subtraction in 4th grade? Like nobody is telling me anything. So I came here for Amira, but now I'm learning that there's other issues that need to be addressed. You know, you guys have got to start communicating with the parents at home. We want to be involved. We're expecting the schools to communicate with us, and we beg, we volunteer, and it's still not happening. Thank you.
Ms. Sulem Mendez, please join us. Thank you.
Hello. I've met of you guys already before. I am a Dunbar mom. My children do come from Dunbar. I have 2 of my children that go to Magnet. I am disappointed in the district that the fact that my children had to get taken out of Dunbar, a school that they have been there since they were little, preschool, Head Start. That's all they know. I am disappointed at the fact that they had to move to Magnet, and I understand that Magnet is a great school, but that's not the school that my kids belong in. I'm just wondering how much more teachers are they gonna remove, or how much more teachers are they gonna quit for our children to learn their education and move to a different school, to a different state, because the Phoenix doesn't help. Phoenix is not helping them to achieve what they need. It's not helping our children. My kids do have a great grades at Dunbar. They're at Magnet right now, and their grades are not as well as the kids at Magnet, only because my kids are not at the same expectation level as Magnet students. My kids are used to being with their teachers at Dunbar. I was a Dunbar student myself. Ms. Nelson was my teacher. Ms. McConkey was my brother's teacher. Ms. Shear was my brother's teacher. My brother passed away 6 months ago. And I am so disappointed that you guys were able to move my children out of a school that myself grew up and my brothers and sisters went to. And my kids now have to go to a whole different school. And I understand that Magnet's a good school, but there's also other schools that are good as well as Magnet. Dunbar is one of them as well. Not as great as Magnet or great as any other schools, but they are great. And I just want you guys to understand that you guys have to have some resource to bring teachers back, because there's going to be other schools that are going to be in the same position as Dunbar, and I don't think that's fair. And I don't want other kids' education, like my kids' education, get brought up saying to me when I go to parent teachers conference, telling me that my kids are not on the same level as these Magnet kids. You know, we've been feeling attacked, not in a way that you guys might understand, but there's have been some attacks on us Dunbar families. And I don't think that's right, because we're not attacking them as they're attacking us. They're attacking us and making it seem like it's our kids' fault that they had to get transferred to another school, and their kids are not where they should be being involved with these kids. And that's not how school's supposed to be. School's supposed to be where we learn, and teachers communicate, and we try to expect the best thing for our children as we expect as the teachers. I just want to, just one more thing before I go. I just want you guys to really think of what type of teachers are we putting our kids into, and how much more teachers are we going to lose if you guys don't do something about this? Thank you.
Mr. David Diaz, please come up. Please join us. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, hi, my name is David and I'm currently a student teacher at Magnet Traditional School. For the past few weeks, it's definitely been, a change. As a student teacher, the first time I accepted a position as the 6th grade teacher, it was because I was told that I would be in charge of a class of 19 students. Of course, the number went to 31 and, it's not that I don't welcome the students. I welcome them with open heart, with open arms. The road is bumpy, but it's what I get told, that in your first year, it'll be bumpy. It's normal. Now, I could go on and say how it's just been challenging for me, but instead, I think I just want you guys to know that today, I stopped lecture because I wanted my students to just write a prompt about how they were feeling, all of my students. I gave them 6 minutes to just write what was on their mind. In the end, I told them, if you guys want to, you can anonymously put your letters in my desk. You don't need to share them out with anybody. If you want to, anonymously, you can put them in my desk and I'll read them. I went home, read some letters, and a lot of students just miss how things were. Some students, they miss Dunbar. Their heart is at Dunbar. And, I told them that, look, I know that I will never replace what you guys had at Dunbar. I probably will never be the teacher that you guys had at Dunbar. I'm sure you guys had amazing teachers at Dunbar. And keep that heart. Don't lose it. I don't want to replace it. It's fine. But know that as your teacher at Magnet, if there's ever a concern, you can always tell me. All of my students in there, I love them. They are my motivation to at least go to work. But as a student teacher, this is too much. I'm learning things, and oftentimes I feel like I barely make it through the day. It's just, I really wish that maybe I had more support or something, because I want to teach them. It's just, I just need help. But that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Can we please have Yvette Guerra come forward? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's not the same teaching kids and being in front of adults. But something I do want to say is I used to work for the district back in 2008 and left in 2013. I decided to come back last year because the position was open at Magnet. I'm currently there and I love Magnet. I love Mr. Walker. I love Mr. C. They're amazing. The way that they administrate the school, it definitely speaks a lot. I was a little concerned when we took Dunbar students because we do have a lot of student teachers. And it was a lot for them, to add this on their plate. And just like Mr. Diaz spoke, it definitely has been rough on them. I think personally, this is my 10th year teaching. If that would have happened to me, I feel like I could have handled it better because I've been in the classroom for so long. It's easier for someone who has been in the classroom than someone who's barely starting. So I'm not here to say whether Dunbar students need to go or stay. I believe that all students deserve an excellent education, whether it's Magnet students, Dunbar students, they all deserve to be heard. Parents deserve to be heard. And I think right now what's going on is that parents feel blindsided. It wasn't communicated to them well. And maybe going forward, this is something that we can learn from to better communicate things and that way work as a community because we are a community. What can we do better to support our students, our parents, and our teachers? Because like they said, if teachers don't feel the support, they're going to walk out. Thank you.
If anyone else would like to fill out a comment card, please, by all means, feel welcome to do so. We have reached the end of the list that I do have. But if not, we will move on. And administration will definitely be mindful of the concerns that we hear today. The board is not able to speak on those. At least I should say respond directly to those comments, but our administration has heard them and they would be the definite people you want to contact to hear back on those. With that, we will move on to item E, I believe, our consent agenda. Any recommendations, Dr. Davila Hagigat?
Yes, we recommend that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve our consent agenda as presented?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
Thank you.
Alicia Vink, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, may we please have a roll call vote, Ms. Miriam, to approve our consent agenda?
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink.
Aye.
Thank you. With that, our motion passes. And we will move on to item F1, our MTSS presentation.
Yes,
And I would-
President Trujillo, Vice President Bueno, and members of the board cabinet, I'd like to welcome Dr. Alshire, who will have the opportunity to come and share with us about MTSS.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Alshire. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good evening, President Trujillo, board, government board member, to our community that are here today, and to everyone that is viewing online. It's my pleasure today to present for you the information regarding MTSS and the work that we're doing across our district throughout all of our schools in regards to this model and the changes that we're making, especially in light of the pandemic and what that has meant in terms of implementation. So that being said, oh, there we go. Oh, see it right off the bat.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify what MTSS is?
I sure will. So yeah, and I'm getting ready because there's a whole alphabet soup slide that I'll get into. But MTSS is the shorthand for multi-tiered systems of support. And so MTSS is sort of the wraparound supports that we utilize across the district to support, enrich, and in some cases prevent student needs from hampering their student success. So I'll talk a little bit more about the standardized definitions and all of the acronyms that kind of go with it. But it is this overarching structure that we have academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally to support our students at all different levels. And the need for this has become increasingly clear as a result of the pandemic itself. As a result of the pandemic, many different ways that we teach and interact with our students have fundamentally changed. And what we are seeing in large part are student needs that were going largely unaddressed during the past 2 years during the pandemic are now beginning to arise, and we're seeing them in our schools, and we're developing new ways to address those and support our students. So for example, we are seeing an increase in the number of incidents requiring the support from the district threat management team. So we have threat management teams on every single campus. These are staffed by extraordinary professionals, administration, as professionals and teachers. And when incidents occur on a campus, very, very serious incidents occur on a campus, these teams respond and develop the wraparound supports that are necessary to really help and support the families and the students that are involved. Sometimes these situations are such that they actually rise to the district threat management team level. This is situations in which they are so serious that the district threat management team, which I'm a part of, are brought in to address. So one example was in 2021 to 2022, so this is the entire year last year, we had 31 threat management team referrals. So these were incidents on campuses that required that level of intervention and support. Of those, 14 or about 45% of them were referred up to the district threat management team for a response, follow-up services, and so on and so forth. This year, just basically from August to now, we have had 16 threat management team meetings already occurred this year, 8 of which have risen to the level of the needing district threat management team support. So we're obviously seeing a very, very large increase in the number of students that need support and incidents that need support. I think this is due both in part because of the pandemic that we just discussed, but also we're getting better at identifying and supporting students and seeing where those needs are. And so I'm very, very proud of the systems that we're developing as a result of that. But as we've talked about, and as the board has reviewed as well, there are continuing concerns about overall absenteeism and the impact of us getting our students coming back into the school that we've lost throughout the pandemic. And also, of course, as Dr. Hagegat pointed out, we're doing trainings on issues of unaddressed trauma that have occurred throughout the past 2 years and even prior to that, that are impacting our students and our teachers and our staff. So with this being said, I'd like to propose a theory of action that has led to the work that I'm presenting here today on multi-tiered systems of support. I know this is a model that the board has been utilizing in their research focus to really analyze and look at educational issues at a larger scale. So I'm really happy that this fits really well into that model. So for the inputs that go into there, we begin with highly trained staff. For the past 2 years, I have been training MTSS facilitators throughout the entire district. Every single one of our campuses have one. And due to an ADE grant for the past 2 years, we've been having funding and extra resources and extra training and support to train those individuals who then in turn are trainers of trainers and are able to take that training back to their own school sites. Issues of accessible data, that has been a major challenge for our districts. And I'm very proud to talk in a little bit here about some of the work that we're doing to make that data more accessible, both to our teachers, but also to all of our principals and leaders throughout the district. The development of functioning systems throughout each school that I'll talk a little bit about that are universal, and then resources that are then being tailored to student needs. The outputs that come from this are stronger collaboration amongst the various professionals and advocates that are on school sites, wraparound supports, and you'll be hearing me utilize that term a lot, as opposed to just an intervention or a support. Wraparound supports are those supports that really address all the various needs children might have, from absenteeism to behavior to academics. We realize that the complexity of the human spirit is such that we need to be able to provide a length of experiences and supports around the children, and meaningful interventions that actually are related and rooted in data. The ultimate outcome is going to be equity, and the equity is whether it's student academic success or student well-being. No matter what campus our students are on, these systems exist, and the training that goes behind them and the resources behind them are done universally throughout the district. So going back to Ms. Bueno's question about MTSS, I'm a visual person, so I really like to have the larger visual of what that encapsulates. And so this is sort of that framework. And it's had a real evolution as time has gone on. It used to be sort of something that people just looked at a response to intervention. It was simply an academic support. As you can see with this sort of expanded definition of what multi-tiered systems support is, it really becomes multi-tiered and multi-systematic, right? So it's looking at prevention, it's looking at enrichment, and it's also looking at intervention when necessary. But all of our children need all of these things. They all need these in various aspects and various levels. And how that is done is through a various number of means that we're going to be talking about, many of which I just outlined in the sort of the inputs and outputs aspect of what we do. But professional development, parental engagement, curriculum, tier 1 instruction, PBIS, these are all things that we are doing throughout our district to really enhance this model, to take it to the next level of what it can and should be. And that does lead us to our alphabet soup, right? So you'll be hearing me utilize several different terms throughout this. So MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, and it is multi-tiered systems of support because it's behavioral, it's academic, it's social emotional. RTI is response to intervention. That tends to be the academic arm of what MTSS is. PBIS is positive behavior intervention systems. That is more of the behavioral and SEL component of what MTSS is. Every single one of our school sites has these various branches incorporated into them and training that is done universally throughout our district to support. SEL is social emotional learning. And as you heard me refer to before was the threat management team, the TMT. There's also the district threat management team when issues rise to such a need that they need district intervention and support, as well as the intensive therapeutic program or intensive therapeutic intervention or ITI program. I'll speak a little bit about that program as well as it relates to the MTSS process. So I won't go through all of this, but I am huge on flowcharts. So this was a flowchart that we created as we engaged in this journey really at the beginning of the pandemic 2 years ago, and looking at what are the various structures and the ways that they mutually reinforce each other throughout every single one of our schools. So this is actually not district-wide. This is within a school itself of what an MTSS process would look like. So on one end, you have the student success or student support teams. That is essentially the academic wing of the support services and intervention. That is run by the MTSS facilitator. I meet with them every month, and we've been working together for 2 years on training and supports, and we'll talk a little bit about more what that looks like. You also on every single campus have a Pbis committee. The work that we've really been doing since the pandemic is incorporating more trauma-informed practices and social emotional learning supports into that Pbis model. We've done some really innovative work over the past summer, where actually our district is being represented at the Betsy conference just in another month, where Capital specifically will be presenting some of the work they've done on PBIS and the incorporation of SEL into their model. But many of our schools have done similar work over the past 2 years to expand that model. And then these all go into our best instruction framework, right? Our tier 1 instruction. What is it that we are doing on a day-to-day basis? These systems are meant to interact and support what those overall instructional systems look like on each school site. Now, in regards to training, I've pointed out a couple times, training. I could go on and on about the work that we've been doing, but best synopsis is the work we've done on root cause analysis. So root cause analysis, really when we're looking at case studies of student intervention, is really looking at all of the needs a student might have and then identifying which of those needs most immediate attention. Many times in a RTI or a student support team meeting, a teacher will come and refer a student and say, this student needs support. They need support because they're not necessarily at grade level for reading or not necessarily, and they're not necessarily at grade level for math. We know those things are connected, right? A student's ability to read often impacts their ability to perform math at those higher levels. But then they also might indicate that the student is absent a lot and the student might have health concerns. It's really then up to the MTSS facilitator and that opportunity of that collaboration of the professionals to say, what is going to be the big lift right now? What are the things that we really need to be addressing right now? Because if we try and address everything at once, what ends up happening is there's too many interventions in place, there's a lack of fidelity, and then people feel unsuccessful. So we're really looking at what are the things that we need to address, but in order to do that successfully, we need to have the right data. Right? Up to this point, it was just conversational. It was quantitative, anecdotal evidence of, well, we think this might be the issue or this might be the issue. So when we talk about the inputs and the importance of those inputs, that accessible data is key. And we realized very early on as we were engaging in this process, and especially now that the complications have increased so much with our kids post-pandemic, that the need of really reliable data is essential. So this year we are investing in a major change for data accessibility in our district. Over the past 2 years, as I indicated before, we were part of an ADE grant, basically a cohort grant. We had the largest number of participants of any district in the state of Arizona. As part of that, we had 19 participants over the course of 2 years. That was every MTSS facilitator in our district, as well as myself and a handful of other individuals at the district level that were there to support. So for the past 2 years, we've been working very, very closely together on these models and on these systems. As part of that opportunity, we were introduced to a program called Panorama. And Panorama was basically, it's a platform that tries to align multiple points of data to identify students at the greatest risk, utilizing the same measurements that we utilize for high school promotion and high school retention, right? Which are student academic data, attendance, behavior, and social emotional wellness. So the research is really clear that those are the highest indicators to determine if students will get to high school and if they will persist in high school. So in 2021, we had 7 schools that basically piloted the Panorama program. They utilized it in their MTSS meetings. They used it in their leadership team meetings to really develop the program. And to the credit of this platform, they accepted feedback over and over again from us, which allowed them then to craft the program to really specifically meet the needs of Phoenix 1, because we have our own unique needs. While this is a national program that is done all over the United States, they were really customizable to the programs, the needs, and the assessments that we have here. MTSS facilitators, social workers, and administrators have all been trained on the use of that program at those 7 schools. And now we are rolling that tool out district-wide. So we have now acquired that program for all of our schools in the district. Now, I will happily come to anyone at any time and walk you through step by step what the program entails. I'm doing that training throughout the district throughout this year, but I'm just going to give you some quick screenshots. This is something that you would see at the at a leadership level. We can look at it at a district level. So those of us at a district level doing that work, we can see this district wide at every single school. If I'm a school principal, which is something that I really want to keep in mind as we are rolling this out, is what can a school principal have access to and see easily and clearly? This is the view of a school at a random school, right? Where they can see very clearly the academic ratings, the attendance ratings, the behavior ratings, and social emotional wellness. This system communicates with all the data that we collect. It communicates with Synergy, which is our student information platform. So every night when our Synergy rolls over for attendance, it's communicating with that program to record the attendance of our students. If there's a discipline issue and an ODR entry, it is communicating with that program to give us the data that we're seeing there for behavior. It's also communicating with all of our various Ames Web Plus, iReady, all of the assessments that Dr. Lloyd has brought to our district over the past 2 years. It communicates with all of those as well to create these profiles of academic success or academic risks for our students. So it's a way to take all these various data points that we are doing throughout our district and put them into one very accessible way for our leaders to be able to do something with. Now, I talked a little bit about root cause. It also allows you to go in and look at a student at a student level, right? So this is an example of a student profile where it identifies their academic score. And again, that's basically an assessment score. It's identifying their lowest assessment score and highlighting that for your observation, their attendance, behavior, social emotional wellness, and well-being. As you can see, we might have a student that's at risk, but when you utilize this program, you can see when you put all of those things together, the root cause may be academics, right? That's the area for us to focus in. Their attendance, we need to kind of keep an eye on it, right? It's identified that they're at risk, but not necessarily at that threshold yet. But also they have very high social emotional wellness scores that is in areas of emotional regulation or growth mindset, and their well-being might be something we need to be taking a look at as well. So it allows you to really narrow in on an individual student. And if you have them and you're bringing them into an RTI meeting or a student support meeting, to really look and have accessible data to do something with. And as you can see, it really works to take that data and make it meaningful for our teachers and for our support staff. So it really digs in deep to really map out the data over time for our students, and so that those interventions can then be developed. And again, I'm rolling out a training right after fall break for our MTSS facilitators, because it also will allow you to then input the interventions into the program itself. And so it will allow us to keep track of that over time as well. And I highlight all of this just because it will be an ongoing project that we're doing throughout the year that I believe will really strengthen our MTSS process. Right now, we've developed really strong systems, really strong training, but we really needed the tools to be able to kind of put all of those various systems together in a way to really combine the work that Dr. Lloyd and other members of the curriculum and instruction team have done to bring all these assessments together. And it becomes all of that in one place for our teams. So what does that mean for future agenda items and future things that we're working on throughout the year? We talked a little bit about attendance. We're continuing to work on that. I have been working with MIS as to really work with Synergy to have it more aligned to the practices of our school sites in terms of automatically alerting school sites of when students are trending towards chronic absence. That's different than truancy. Chronic absence is when students are approaching that threshold of 10% or more of the school days missed versus truancy, which is just counting unexcused absences. We want to look at all of the absences that are going on with students because any day a student is away from school is a day that they're missing instruction. We've also talked about the implementation of second step curriculum district-wide. We just obtained that program and we'll be rolling that out as well. As I've mentioned throughout this presentation, the training and use of Panorama as a platform for MTSS. Our larger goal is not only for MTSS, but it be something that our PLCs and DCTMs are also working towards in that part of in strengthening tier 1 instruction. But we really are starting right now with the MTSS teams as we're rolling that out to create that capacity for those people at each individual school site to be trainers at their own school sites and bring it out to their teachers and bring it out to their teams. As Dr. Hagegat pointed out, we are now embarking on some work with ADE on the training on the trauma resiliency project. That is very, very exciting. And I hope to update you more as we progress in that. And then analysis of data from ITI to determine its effectiveness. And that is again, that's our intensive trauma informed program that we utilize in conjunction with MTSS as well as district threat management teams. And with that, that is my full presentation on where we're at currently for MTSS. So I thank you all very much for your time. And thank you.
We have questions. That was awesome.
I think
Thank
we
you.
all might. Good try though, Dr.
I just, every moment I tried. Can't blame me.
Thank you. I appreciate that we're bringing that asset to our school for our students, so that we can drive positive student academic outcomes and mental health well-being. My question is how long, I imagine it's not like this is a 10-day process, but how long is a process like that take for a student to get them to a point where they are not considered at risk academically or in well-being?
And that's the $1 million question. It's going to be a case by case scenario. In some of the situations, we identify on a root cause analysis that really attendance is the key. And in that case, appropriate interventions with the social worker, home visits, bringing in outside agencies. A lot of times it's environmental issues. They don't have a car. They don't have, there's all of these other things. Those are sort of some easier fixes. When we are dealing with students that are not on grade level, then we need to really look at how far beyond, below grade level they are. We have students that can get caught up relatively quickly. We have a lot of students that need a lot more and a lot more support. I believe truly that by bringing this data component in, it's going to accelerate that, right? Because we could be able to, as opposed to looking at all these various points of data and having this big meeting, I've been in them, right? We're pulling the iReady data, we're pulling this, we're pulling that. Those become very cumbersome. And this allows us very quickly to have a very efficient system. But the interventions, like anything else, are really going to be varied upon the individual child. Some of our children have a lot of needs. And once we get done addressing one need, it might be another need that we then turn around and address, right? If we address the attendance issue, now we find out the student has had an attendance issue for years, which have put them back behind academically. We've addressed the attendance issue. Now what are we going to do to make sure the child can read at grade level? So sometimes it's kind of like whack-a-mole. Great, we solved this issue. Let's now address this issue. But it's that issue of root cause that's so critically important. So we're not trying to address everything at once. Yeah. Let's find the things that are most accurate and most beneficial to the student and see where that brings us.
And then I appreciate you touching on equity and just to that point, to guide the work that we're doing and the equity work we're doing and want to continue doing for students. Does this system, is equity a focal point in the system? And I'm specifically thinking like one instance, like, is it tracking demographic information for us?
So this Yeah, well, it can filter a demographic. I mean, it can filter demographic, it can filter by language, any number of things in terms of that. Data warehouse also does the same thing. And I believe I have a presentation in the meet sometime in the future to talk about discipline in ways that incorporates. To go back to your earlier question about equity, if we say that our definition of equity is that every student gets exactly what they need, this is exactly what that does, right? It is a system to really identify the individual needs of every single student and provide the supports that that student needs. Your needs as a learner are going to be very different from my needs as a learner and very different from Dr. Hagegat's needs as a learner. The question is, do we have the data, do we have the systems, and do we have the training to address your needs while simultaneously also addressing mine and addressing others? So that's really, for me, the heart and heart of this work is that we are really working to meet the individual needs of every single student, and that at its heart is what equity is about in education.
Thank you. And then how are you using this MTSS system or multi-tiered system of support to predict and how are you using this to support action plans at schools where we predict that and we know they're going through traumatic events such as our transition, so that we can especially prioritize those schools and those communities, because we know that they're going to need that extra support. So how can this system, or how are we already using this system to support action plans at all across our district, but at this time too, specifically those school sites?
Yep. Phenomenal question. Couple different ways to answer that. So we have students that we have identified as in traumatic events, right? The members that are on the MTSS team, it fluctuates depending on the need of that student, right? So if we have a student that has housing instability or needs out of a social emotional nature, people on the MTSS team might be the family and community engagement specialist if we're needing to bring outside resources. It might be the social worker who's providing one-on-one counseling support. Again, it's going to be really dependent on the team to identify and collaborate together on what the need of that child is to be able to do it. Then you have these situations in which you have sort of these monumental events like the the threat management teams that we had, right? Where we talked about those referrals where things happen on campuses and it really requires all the professionals to come together to support. Students that go into that process, we don't just handle the one issue and say, okay, I hope you're okay. Like, no, that student then becomes part of the MTSS process. And we developed one of the major things about MTSS is it tracks and it's consistent routine check-in with the intervention, right? So if a student is in MTSS, we utilize data to track what's going on with them, but we make sure that then that case is revisited 4 to 6 weeks from now. How are they still doing? What is still going on? Are the interventions being successful? And that is largely the power of what the MTSS teams do, because the schools are doing all of these things. We know they are, but the MTSS team systemizes that process and really creates a pathway of communication, collaboration, but also accountability, because we're actually keeping track of that data.
Thank you. And then we'll talk about action plans for those schools. Are there actual documents, action plans for the school, or is this something that just organically unfolds?
No, we've got lots of documents. So if we're in the case of, it depends on the case, right? So if we've got a situation in which we really need to take a student and perhaps, for example, provide intensive therapeutic support for that child, and they are taken from the school site, provided supports before they go back in, we have reentry plans. So the extensive documentation of what that looks like, data that we need to identify and track, goals that we need to set, just the system and process and paperwork that goes into a threat management team referral and what that looks like. It is all embedded in this idea that it has to be sustainable and it has to be well documented, and it has to be something that we can kind of come back to and say, this is the plan. This is what we said we were going to do. So all of those cases and all those instances create action plans around the child to make sure that we have prevention and support for them.
So they're child specific, not school specific.
They're district wide. It is the same set of forms district wide, but the information and the data we put into those forms are going to vary case by the child.
Okay. Thank you. Just two things as a follow-up, and I'll just do them as a board update, but I do want to see this in action, what MTSS looks like. And so I would request a board invite to the PD that you're going to host after fall break. And then, so I'm excited to see that. And then generic action plan. I know if it may have personal identifiable information, is just crossing that out. And I would just be interested in see what that action plan looks like.
Absolutely. And in one of the slides you saw, there was a link there. What I'll also include there, we over the past 2 years have developed an MTSS handbook for our district. Tempe Union recently asked to have it, and they're modifying it for themselves as well. It's going to have everything that you're asking for in there in terms of the action plans, the notes, the templates. It's something that our team has developed over the past 2 years, and they're very, very proud of. So I'll include that in the board update for you as well.
Thank you.
Great. That's a great segue to my question about the handbook.
Mhm.
I did see it on your slide number 6 on the flow chart
Yep.
slide. But I just wanted to ask, who is that handbook intended for? And was your team the author?
Our team is the author, so we're very, very proud of it. Now, I believe that the hardest work should be done in collaboration. So I reached out to other people in a similar position as mine throughout the country, Florida, Texas, Missouri, Maine, California, and Colorado. Half of them reached back out to me and provided me with different resources. So some of it I conveniently stole, the rest but it's all been adapted for our district. So our team, and it wasn't me, it was our entire MTSS team and the facilitators. It's been 2 summers of work. I'm sorry. So we are the author. What was the other question you had?
Who the handbook is intended
It is
for?
intended for MTSS facilitators, but we have expanded it because there's a whole section on PBIS in there because that's part of the MTSS process. So it also goes to PBIS facilitators, MTSS facilitators, and of course our social workers have been able to utilize it because they've been major contributors to it as well.
So I love all of that. I'm super excited to hear about how far and wide we are collaborating to get these things done. I am just wondering though, since we do have a group of dedicated parents here with us tonight and watching online, can you tell us a little bit about what this might look like from a parent's point of view?
I'm really glad you asked that.
Thank you.
Because that was something that our MTSS facilitators felt very, very strongly about. And it's something that's actually missing from the model in large part. We tend to sort of say, we have the child, we'll work on the child, we'll let you know how it all comes out. Our MTSS facilitators did not want that to be the case. So there's actually a couple different ways that you see that. There are letters that go home when a child is brought into an MTSS process. There is a letter that essentially is sent out to families saying, we believe that your child is in need of support in X, Y, and Z. It's very detailed in terms of what that support would look like, going back to that root cause. We're not going to just send out 1,000 things and what the data is to match it. But what our team is really proud of is that we created a survey component for the families saying, can you please tell us what you're seeing at home? Can you please tell us what your child's strengths are? What are their challenges? How are they feeling about school? And inviting them to be a participant on the MTSS team itself. Our motto is that our caregivers are our children's first teacher. And what better way to find out what has historically been going on with a lot of these kids, because sometimes they've been struggling for many, many years, than to bring in the caregivers themselves and bring them to that purpose. So again, in that MTSS handbook, there's a whole section on parental and caregiver involvement that shows you the template for the letter, as well as the survey that we would send home to a family when a child is brought into MTSS to get their input. They don't have to be a participant. We realize our families are very busy, but we do have families that want to be part of that team, and they bring in a great deal of knowledge and expertise about their children.
Thank you. Do families have to give consent for their child to be part of this process?
I've never had a situation where a family said they didn't want their child to be a part of this process. I would imagine if a family ever said, I don't want this to happen, we would try and find another way to support. It's important to note that this is not an IEP, right? This is not a documentation of a disability. This is not a medical diagnosis. This is us looking at a kid and saying, what do they need? And what can we provide before any of those things are actually talked about and considered? We far too often, we know in urban communities that we estimate the number of students that should be on IEPs or needing those documentation, oftentimes because we haven't done the background work, the footwork that really needs to go in to get them caught up. So it's not meant to be a formalized, institutionalized process. It's more of this is the system that we have. These are the people that would be involved. This is the wraparound supports and the philosophy that kind of goes into it. And we try to really assure parents that that's really a collaborative approach. So in the 2 years that I've been the coordinator for this, we've never once had a parent ever say no. But I look forward to having those conversations if they ever do happen, because I would want it to, as the coordinator, directly step in under that one and be able to talk to them about the power of the program.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it's so collaborative on for the families as well. My last question is, about the capacity of our teachers, like how much time does this process take and how are we making sure that our classroom teachers and supports have time to follow through with this?
I think that's a totally extremely valid question. And it was one of the major hurdles that we had at the very beginning. I do believe, again, going back to it, that having the panorama system, all the things I just showed you, a teacher has the ability to pull that right up. So in one shot, a teacher has to be able to see the iReady scores, Ames Web Plus, AZ Merit, all of those things in just one click. So before with MTSS, we were asking teachers to bring all of those things, or somebody was having to find all those individual things. That won't be the case any longer. But the idea is really to provide support to the teacher, because many of our teachers are struggling to provide these supports in the classroom, and it's very time consuming and very, very disheartening for many of them. The whole point of this is to bring us your child. Let us have that sort of it takes a village approach, and let us all have a part of what's going on with them. So I would say it's meant to be supportive and collaborative, and actually take away some of that heartache from some of our families or some of our teachers that are working so hard to provide so many different types of support. We have so much expertise in our buildings, so much training in our buildings. It's an opportunity for that teacher to bring that child, the work that they've already been done, and have it honored, and have us systematize it and bring in other supports that are going to be able to make their job more meaningful, and a more meaningful experience, obviously, for the success of the child.
Thank you. Have our teachers provided feedback on the system? Is it working the way that?
I think that's well, yes. So last year we did a survey from our MTSS facilitators in terms of how they felt the rollout was going and their work with the teachers. It was overwhelmingly positive. I do believe the next phase of this, as we kind of go through, I'm also especially interested in their feedback as we get into the panorama system, things like that, is collecting that well from the teachers themselves.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a more quick question about the process. So when you say we've got 31 or 16 threat management things
Yeah,
to,
these
is
events on
that-
campus.
Yes.
Mhm.
So is that when like this whole process gets used? Is that when the root cause analysis goes?
We know
through?
those are extreme cases. This is utilized for students all over. So yes, we have these instances in which threat management teams are enacted, and MTSS is integral to that process, as is RITI. But a child who is just 3 grade levels behind in reading, and the teacher knows this, and they are not understanding their phonics, and the teacher has done all of these interventions for 6 weeks, and they're out of ideas. That is ideally what this program is for. The system is for them to be able to bring and say, this is what I've done. This is the data I've collected. This is the goal I think is realistic for the child. But I've done everything I can. Don't ask me to teach the lesson again. What can I do? And it brings those professionals together to deconstruct the goal further. Maybe are we really addressing the right problem? What is the data that we're using? Many times the goals need to be refined. Are they more realistic? Can we find goals that would allow us to see success? In all of those cases, students at every school, we've got dozens of students in some cases that are part of this MTSS process at some point during the school year. They can come in, get the support, we document the support stays, right? Because we don't go on a diet, lose weight, and then just eat nachos again, as delicious as that sounds right now. We stay on it, right? And that's how this whole process. So interventions are exactly the same process, but it's a way for us to document what those look like for our kids. So to answer your question, yes, it is definitely used in those larger case scenarios, but it's impacting, many, 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 many more students. And my MTSS facilitators could certainly talk to you about the number of kids that they see on that caseload.
Now you answered my question just so I can get a visual, like, since there is so many moving parts to it, I just wanted to kind of wrap my head around its association with each other.
Mhm.
So my next question is more general. When we say a letter is going out to a student's family, is that consistent across the district, or like however that one person, I guess, has a discretion to say, we're just throwing this in a backpack, or it'll be an email? Like what does that
I would
look
love to
like?
say 100% happens every single time. It is a goal that we're working towards. The MTSS facilitators generated the letter, they created the letter. It was their passion to have it done. I think we are moving in a way that is becoming more and more common that we're doing that. I think for some situations, it's sort of let's do a couple different things and see kind of what's going on. For example, we have a lot of MTSS that's triggered and then we find out no health screening's been done, right? And, so there's some of these things where like, let's try and get some of these things handled before we then bring in the big guns. But we are working to systemize that process throughout every single school. It is a standardized letter throughout the entire district, and it should be the MTSS facilitator or the teacher of record that is sending that home to families.
Thank you. I look forward to that update later. But I don't have any more questions. Everybody else good? All right.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thanks
wonderful
very
evening.
much. Thank you very much, Dr. Alshire. We will move on to item G1, request approval for the fiscal year annual financial report.
This evening, we have Mr. Quintana, who will have the opportunity to share with us the annual financial report. Over to you, Mr. Quintana.
Thank you, Dr. Hygat. Good evening, governing board, as well as the listening audience. So it's that time of year again where by October 15th every year, the district all districts have to submit their annual financial report to ADE. And before we ask for your approval, we wanted to provide some basic information from the report itself, and also, answer any questions that you might have before you approve it. So by way of background, the annual financial report is a financial report that recaps the district's revenues and expenses for the fiscal year. And again, keeping in mind that the fiscal year runs from July through June. So this report is actually from starting last July through this June 30th of this year. The AFR is due to the ADE by the 15th of this month and every year. The report outlines all the revenue expenses by funding source, which are for the most part maintenance and operations, which is M&O, the bigger part of the budget. All the federal projects and grants, capital outlays, bond building and bond funds that we have and that we're using, capital side fund, and other funds as well that we incorporate into our budget as well. It also recaps the expenses and revenues by categories, meaning by salaries and related expenses, administration, instruction, special ed, et cetera, as well as capital and major expenses. So I wanted to describe a little bit of the process that we followed to generate this information. And also the timing. As I mentioned, this is for the fiscal year of last year ending June 30th. And we basically go through a closing process after June 30th for about 3 months, basically from July, August, and September. We go through a closing process of the books, which incorporates recognizing and confirming all the revenues, confirming all the expenses, review the allocations and do journal entries if we have to make adjustments. And also this is information that's to be audited here, coming soon in October, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. So this process it takes 2 to 3 months to complete the closing process. And I'll have to say that we did get behind schedule this year with the closing process, mainly due to some challenges we had with some staffing that left the organization and left the district during this time. However, we are pleased to be working with Heimfield and Meach that are able to help us stay on track with the financial reporting and so forth and information. In fact, we have a representative, Ms. Cheryl White, that's here this evening, that has personally worked on this AFR, as well as other things that are part of the closing process. Cheryl and her staff have also been working with us for probably over a year as we transition directors of finance and budgeting, as well as to make sure we're keeping up with all the fiscal responsibilities that we have to do as and complete as a district. I mentioned the independent audit, and so that's something that we're looking to start here in October. And typically we have a firm that's called Dobridge, and This year, that's changing because this company got bought out, it got acquired by a different company during the year by the name of CWDL. And so this new firm is going to be doing the audit this year. Excuse me, this year. We are going through the process, however, of having to reassign the contract from Dobridge over to CWDL, and it has to go through the AG's office. So right now, we're going through the process of getting it approved by the AG's office, and once we do, then we'll begin the audit here starting soon. And as I mentioned, the recap is, and we're confirming all the revenues expenses. That's something that we have to do, over the last, basically starting from July 1st on. And that entails confirming and clearing all the purchase orders that are out there that are pending. It also entails matching those POs with any invoices of service that we provide or products. And we want to make sure we also pay those invoices. And also confirming all the revenue and accounts, and balances. The AFR forms, that's something that we typically get some changes from AG's office every year. And so that's something, sometimes they come, within, give us enough time. Sometimes they come later on in the time frame. This year, I think that they did a pretty good job of, updating information and the forms in a fairly timely manner. So that's kind of describing a little bit of the process. Obviously it's, there's a lot more goes into this besides what I'm describing, but you kind of, it gives you a sense of what it takes to close the books, as well as prepare this annual financial report. I want to provide, as we put the actual report on board docs. So as you can see, it's a very lengthy report, 17, 18 pages of a lot of financial data. And we want to recap some of the information for you this evening and kind of highlight some of the information from the report. And this particular chart shows a summary of all the revenue expenses, for the year. And now I'm going to focus initially on the middle column, which is the current year, meaning that's the year that we're providing this information for, which was for the fiscal year 21-22. If you look at this, we have $47.9 million of revenues coming in. I'm sorry, revenues coming in. But also I want to emphasize that this is for M&O revenue only. I am going to provide information on expense revenue for the entire district. This particular one, because it's the biggest budget item for the district, that's what we're recapping here is the M&O expenses and revenues. And then at the same time, on this following the same column here, we have $49.3 million of the expenses to the tune of basically having $1.4 million in a deficit, at this point. In comparison to last year, the first column here, this is last year's actual information. And if you look at the data here on revenue side, we have a reduction in revenue from last year that is mainly due to a reduction in ADM for the year, because of lower enrollment. And but at the same time, we also have a higher expenses for the year. In this case, again, 49.3.4 from 47.9 last year. And that's partly a result of funding that we got where we're able to offset last year from ESSER funds and other funds money that we're able to charge it out to ESSER. And so those amounts decrease, this year. And so that's why expenses are a little bit higher this year than they were last year. Obviously, we still have ESSER, but at the same time, we're also kind of shifting the expenses for that, or the coverage of the expenses, as we move along every year. One example is that I can give you is when we're dealing with COVID, for example, and we have to provide extra services, extra cleaning and disinfecting for the classrooms. We use extra time from our staff and our custodial staff to do extra cleaning and so forth. So those expenses were covered by ESSER instead of our regular operational expenses. And as you can see, the year before we did have a surplus of $882,000, which is obviously great, great news. And we'll look at this year and we talked about this year's budget. The one thing that we did do this year, which I think is positive, is that we typically allocate at least $3, sometimes more $1 million of using funds from our carry forward. And this year, instead of using $3.5 million of carry forward monies, we're projecting that we'll only need 1.2. So that's something that I think is a positive trend for this year that we're gonna try to carry that out. So some information related to the revenues and expenses, and also compare to budget. So what we have here is the major categories of revenues and expenses. Again, starting with the M&O on the left side here, that's the highest balance here and the biggest funding. I'll talk a little bit about the federal funds here. That's it's a little bit of an outlier here, but if you compare the M&O to other budgets like federal programs, let's say food service, that generate their own funding, through providing meals. We have obviously bond funds that we get as well for building and maintenance. And on the M&O side, we had revenues coming in and close to, in this case, like I mentioned in the last column, the last page was 47.9 million, almost 48 million. And compared to what we budgeted, we did budget over 50 million, and we didn't get quite that high. On the expense side, the expenses were, a little bit higher than the revenues. And that's the reason why we had the 1.4 deficit at this point. I do want to talk about the federal projects. This incorporates all federal programs, meaning the ESSER funds, all the title funds. So it's not just one bucket of funds. And in this case, the revenues from federal programs is close to 20 million. And on the expense side, it's also close to 20 million. The budgeted item here, which is in this case 70 million, we believe that's an outlier that we think we budgeted for the entire length of the contracts that we have for, let's say, for ESSER funds. Instead of budgeting just for the year, that's the reason this number is so high here. That it's not first of all correct, but it's also that we think it's just an accumulation of all the funds that we expected to get from ESSER for the next couple of years. Then, as far as categories of expenses, naturally, as we discussed before, salaries and benefits is the majority of the expenses that we have. In this case, combined with salaries and benefits, we have a $42.5 million of M&O budget, which is 86% of all the expenses. And we have other categories here, obviously, for purchases. That could be supplies and other more operational things, and maintaining facilities, but and we do also have a budget for supplies. But again, the majority of this is going to be falling on salaries and expenses and for benefits. And as we mentioned here, the benefits alone makes up 23.4% of the overall budget. But it's also something that we're also very proud of, is the fact that we're able to offer our employees a pretty generous retirement plan, as well as benefits that we offer for health insurance, medical insurance, dental insurance, and so forth. So that is that for that information. And again, we'd like to request before we submit the budget 280E by the 15th and no later than, we do need the approval by the board, and that's what we're asking for this evening. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. Will we be able to approve it if the federal projects funding is not for the year?
I'm sorry, can you ask it again?
Will we be able to approve this with the federal funding? You mentioned that wasn't correct, so that it wasn't for the 21-22
Well, yes,
school year?
yeah. So the thing about the item here on the federal funds, that was budgeted last year. And so this year, this past year that we budgeted this, much to a more reasonable level.
Okay.
And so the ongoing funding for this year's budget, this item here and also the M&O budgets were budgeted more appropriately. Yeah, so it won't affect the funding for that at all.
Okay, and then I have another separate question, for in retrospect for this year, as we passed our budget, we ended up having to take action, right, for teacher salaries. So it just leads me to wonder, in that context, how are we for next year, going about building a budget, based on prospective funding that we would get from the legislature? So do we have a plan, or do we have like representation that is talking to our legislative body in terms of like what funding looks like for the following year? I know that making a budget based on their whims is nearly impossible, but still, I think in retrospect, when we saw other schools being able to take action based on their budgets that they passed, being ready to pass viable salary increase options, is something where I want us to get to that point where we do have those options built in our proceeding year's budget. We have those budget options based in, because we are monitoring what's happening, and so that we're able to jump ahead. It's great that our team got together, right? But I do feel like if we were monitoring that and we had those options made available, we could move quicker compared to just like other school districts did.
Right, no, I definitely understand that, your question, we do try to keep tabs of what's going on at the legislature through we have a government relations team that we work with, that basically works with all the districts as well. And as you know, also PETCA is very, very heavily involved in helping us, to support the efforts of funding for our staff and for teachers as well. And so it's something that we'll continue doing, but we do want to continue working with our government liaison to figure out what they keep us updated what's going on at the legislature. And so that's something that's one way that we can stay involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana, for the information. Hearing no further discussion, do we have a motion to move forward with this item?
I motion that we approve fiscal year 2021-2022 annual finance report.
Reggie Carrillo, I motion to approve. Or second, sorry.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Miss Miriam, will we please have a roll call vote? Thank you.
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo.
Aye.
Alicia Vink.
Aye.
Thank you. With that, our motion does pass. Thank you very much, Mr. Quintana. And we will move on to item G2 to discuss our temporary boundary change.
Good evening, President Trujillo, Vice President Bueno, members of the board, cabinet, Ms. Arostegui Johnson, and members of our community that are present here and online. Today, we are going to pop the presentation here shortly. And we have an opportunity to bring this to you as an action item for the Dunbar Elementary temporary boundary change. I share with you that the decision to transfer Dunbar Middle School students to Magnet was not one that was taken lightly. Transferring students from one school to another after the school year has begun is not ideal, but became necessary. With the goal of offering a high-quality education to all students in a safe and nurturing environment, the Phoenix #1 Student Outcome Focused Leadership Team embarked on the journey of exploring options and arriving to decisions in a timely manner. Today, you will have a deeper understanding of how we arrived to the decisions of transferring Dunbar Middle School students to Magnet, the transition to Magnet, and an overview of strategies to continue to build Dunbar Elementary. So as I share here with you, we have our overview that we have our district leaders and principals that will present on the process and the outcomes. So we will hear about the theory of action. We will learn about inputs that influence our outcomes as well as options that were considered, the timeline of events, communication, transition to magnet, and looking into the future. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Diaz, who will get us started on this presentation.
Excuse me. Madam President, members of the board, members of the community. We know that this is a presentation we've previously shared, but we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to share it with anybody who is in the audience today that wasn't here on Friday, who is watching at home as well. Everything that we do is grounded in theories of action. And the theory of action with regards to this change exists of these inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Presenting this on behalf of Dr. Gonzalez, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. In terms of the outcomes we're all aiming for, we're always aiming for equity in student academic success, equity in student well-being. We also know we can't have equity without excellence. And so we're looking for those types of outcomes, excuse me. In order to get to those outcomes, the inputs that we are focusing on are having skilled leaders on our campuses and in our classrooms who can provide wonderful training to make sure that our staff is highly trained. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I not?
Is it on?
Is this thing on?
Okay, good.
Sorry. To make sure that our staff has access to high quality trainings in order to have those quality programs. With those inputs, the outputs that we should see are supportive classrooms that are meeting our students' academic needs, and then leadership who's able to support teacher and staff planning and professional growth. What we started to see in this theory of action were outputs that weren't necessarily commensurate to that. And so we do want to go back then to the inputs that are most contributing to that. As we do that, we know that skilled leaders and training depend very much on staff retention. And so one of the inputs we wanted to share is the retention of Dunbar educators over the past several years. So this is data from as far back as the 2019-20 school year that shares the number of educators who were at the Dunbar campus, their retention rate, meaning the rate at which they return to the next school year. We compared that retention rate to district retention rates. We do see that there is a gap between the Dunbar retention rate and district retention rates. Looking back in the 1920 school year, we can look at that retention over several years. And what we see is that rate gets lower and lower. We also see that in that 21-22 school year, when the retention rate was 53%, it does obviously impact the retention levels of those staff who were new in the 2021 school year, as well as the 1920 school year. Just looking at retention in of itself, we wanted to make sure that we dove a little bit deeper to look for patterns. And we did find a couple. One pattern that we do see is new hire attrition. So what we see in each of these school years is that most of these resignations are coming from folks who are new to the Dunbar campus. In 1920, 8 of the 9 had 2 or less years in Phoenix #1. In 2021, all those resignations were just completing their first year. And in 21-22, 8 of the 9 who resigned had 4 or less years of experience in Phoenix 1. Other pattern that we see in these retention patterns is mid-year and late resignations. And what we do see in this data is that each year the Dunbar campus has experienced mid-year and late resignations. Late resignations, we would say, are ones that occur very late in the summer. And so they put us in quite the bind when it comes to trying to staff for those positions. So in terms of where these inputs are located, they're not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in a broader context as well. So other inputs that influence outcomes are the staffing shortages and teacher shortages that we see statewide and nationwide. Just last week, the National Center for Education Statistics reported that more than 50% of principals across the country are reporting staffing shortages in their schools and the negative impact of those staffing shortages. In June, the Arizona School Personnel Administrator Association reported that there were 2,200 vacancies for teachers across the state, and 66% of districts, Phoenix Elementary included, saw more vacancies in June of 22 than they saw in June of 2021. We're very proud, though, that within that shortage, we were able to recruit and hire 77 new educators for the 22-23 school year. That 77 left us short in a couple of schools, Dunbar being one of them. Where we are short in Dunbar currently is in their middle school, in their language arts as well as their science positions. In their language arts positions, it's important to note that 3 candidates were interviewed for that 6-8 ELA position, but none were selected. We share that as a point of pride. We know that our principals do not dip the bar for expectations of students, and to do that, they cannot dip the bar for expectations of teacher candidates either. So while the narrative that's out there is if you have a pulse and a bachelor's degree, you can become a teacher in our state, that's not true in our district. We definitely expect more of folks, and these folks were just not found to be a great fit for these positions. It's important to also know that Dunbar did hire teachers over the summer and in the spring. 5 teachers and 2 associate teachers specifically were hired for other positions. The Dunbar leadership accomplished this through a number of ways. They attended multiple career fairs, as well as partnership meetings with our university partners. And Dunbar staff participated in our Inspire a Friend program, where we reward staff for bringing in teachers from other places to come teach in their schools. So with that great progress, though, we did find ourselves in a position where we went into the school year with vacancies at Dunbar. And so what I want to share with you next in terms of inputs is this timeline of events. On June 30th, I wrote a memo to all principals that said it was time to go from contingency brainstorming to contingency planning. The reason being that the number of applications we saw in April and May did not look like a typical April and May. It looked like a typical June and July. And so that led us to very much think that June and July will be even drier than usual. So on throughout the month of June, we did a lot of contingency brainstorming of what would happen if we didn't hire certain positions. And so it was now time to go from brainstorming to planning. So in doing that, the Dunbar leadership hired an associate teacher for a 4th grade opening that they had at the time. And they made plans for the administration and for interventionists to teach the 6th through 8th grade ELA. Unfortunately, in early July, unexpectedly, another 6th through 8th grade teacher resigned, and it left them with another vacancy. So on the first day of school, Dunbar leadership taught the 6th and 8th grade ELA sections, as well as the science sections. In fact, those science sections at the beginning of the year were being taught by a gifted teacher who is shared across 3 campuses, but stayed exclusively at Dunbar to teach those science sections. By mid-August, we saw another teacher resignation on the campus in 2nd grade. And so we did transfer a master teacher to the campus to provide more support. We also secured a partner in Gen Tech to integrate into the 6-8 science, so that with the help of another associate teacher, we could free up that gifted teacher to provide those essential services to students. But administrators continue to teach the 6th through 8th grade ELA sections. As you can imagine, when administrators are in classrooms throughout the day, it creates a lot of other impacts throughout the campus. And so by the time we got into late August, we knew we needed to start finding some new solutions, because the weight of those administrators teaching those ELA sections was just being felt up and down the school. So with that into late August, I'll turn it then over to Dr. Hagiat again to talk then about the options that started to be considered as we got into late August.
So as you see our timeline, you see that the options that we needed to consider include what Dr. Diaz just spoke about. And so this was the principal and the leadership team at Dunbar. They looked at ways to be the lead teacher. And so we had our principal teaching 8th grade ELA and integrating social studies, our IEIS teaching 7th grade ELA and also integrating social studies. Our reading interventionist was teaching 6th grade ELA, and then we did the science with Gen Tech. So on August 12th, after I visited the principal in the morning for an informal check-in, I learned that her availability in the afternoon was limited, and that is because she was going to teach 8th grade in the ELA and integrate social studies. So I actually volunteered to come back and co-teach with her. I did not get an opportunity to co-teach. What I did get an opportunity to do is really see her master teacher expertise and as well as support the class. So then we looked at exploring the idea of how we could adjust staffing within Dunbar, moving elementary grade teachers to a middle school. We were unable to proceed with that idea as well because the teachers did not have the needed qualifications to teach middle school subject areas in the 7th and 8th grade. Then another area that we looked at and we explored was the possibility of implementing a self-contained middle school model, but we found that we needed an additional teacher to do that as well. And so understanding that Dunbar needed that support after the 10th day, our Human Resource Director, Dr. Diaz, was looking at at different schools to see if we would be able to involuntarily transfer teachers from other schools to Dunbar that would be qualified in the middle school grades. And we did not have anyone that met that category of being able to be a middle school teacher at Dunbar. So with all those failed attempts, we now reach the idea of really knowing that we want high quality education for our kids, knowing that it wasn't sustainable to keep our principal and IEIS and the reading specialist in the classroom because they were inadvertently not supporting the roles that they were expected to be in support for. For example, our reading specialist was not in a position to support our other grades to continue to accelerate learning for our students. So this is where we went ahead and started to look at what other schools, where did we have program capacity to be able to really provide that education for our students. And that's when we learned that Magnet would have that program capacity, had the transportation. We wanted to keep our students together. We did not want to start splitting families. We knew the change was going to be hard, but we knew that if we kept our families and our students together as much as we could, we would be able to do so and do it in a way that reduced this anxiety and this situation with the change. And so that decision was made so that we could provide that high quality education for our students. And what you will see is our timeline of being able to plan and prepare. This did not come overnight. It was on August 30th through September 6th, where we were brainstorming and planning meetings with district leadership, principals, and department heads to have that collaborative approach to make sure that we were going to be successful in this plan of offering our students that high quality education in different space. September 6th to the 14th, you see the information meetings that we had, including meetings on 9/13 with our Dunbar families to get input specific to the transition. This was a very courageous way of going about this situation. And for me, typically a very collaborative leader, it was very hard to not have some of that initial input from parents because we saw that our resources were specific and we knew that we only had limited choices as we explore the different pieces within our reach. And so we went ahead and met with the parents, received feedback. A lot of their concerns were around transportation. We assured and reassured that we were going to be able to provide that transportation. We also shared that the transportation was to Magnet, but if they chose to be at other schools, that we would work with those families based on program capacity at other schools. Then we had an open house at Magnet Traditional for our Dunbar students. We provided transportation as well, and it was attended by adults and students alike. And we ran a shuttle so that we could make sure that it wasn't a one and done, so that families had the opportunity to visit, where they were welcomed by Mr. Walker, our principal at Magnet, and also staff. And then on September 27th, we had our public hearing, and this is something that is also expected by law because we are changing the boundaries we don't have at this time based on our circumstances, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at Magnet. So we needed to make sure that we went ahead and had all of the boundary change expectations met. The hearing was one of those expectations. And today we are here requesting approval for a temporary boundary change for students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students that were initially attending Dunbar and are now at Magnet. I want to turn it over to Ms. Jeffries, who will share with you our communication plan at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Hagegat, President Trujillo, members of the governing board, and our community. We definitely collaborated with our schools with our communication efforts regarding the transition. On September 9th, we sent a letter home to the Dunbar families informing the families of the issue and what the plan was to temporarily move our students to Magnet.
On that same day, Principal Millsaps also met with the Dunbar students and provided that same information to students. And a robocall, email, and text message was sent to the Dunbar families, informing them of the letter that they would receive in their children's backpacks, and then inviting them to the information meeting, which was being held on Tuesday, September 13th. On September 12th, a reminder call, an email and text was sent to the Dunbar families, reminding them of the meeting being held the very next day. On the 13th, we held 2 family meetings, one in the morning and one in the evening for Dunbar families. And then we held an open, we shared information with the families on the Magnet open house and provided an invitation to all of the families. Principal Walker from Magnet sent a letter home to the Magnet families, informing them of the transition and encouraging them to welcome our Dunbar students to the Magnet family. And then in accordance with law, we held a public hearing, and a public hearing notice was mailed to all of the residents living within the Dunbar attendance boundaries, and we mailed more than 2,500 postcards to that impacted area. On September 14th, Mr. Walker and the Magnet team hosted an open house for the Dunbar students and families, and then the public hearing was held on September 27th. And now I'm going to turn it over to Principal Walker, who is going to talk about the transition to Magnet.
Good evening, Dr. Aguidat, Governing Board, Community, and Cabinet. First and foremost, I want to say that Mr. Diaz, who came up earlier talking about how it's been a transition, I just want to let you know that you are a rock star. So just remember that. We started this out with one-on-one meetings with the 6th through 8th grade team, and I want to say that they are rock stars and really are the unsung heroes who have really made this transition exceed my expectations. Then we had communications to families at Magnet regarding the change. And I will take complete responsibility and accountability, because even though that was not a part of the plan, I really think that I should have done just an informational type of meeting with the parents in person just to explain. So I will take complete ownership of that. There was a welcome letter sent by me to the Dunbar families that were transitioning to Magnet. And then there were individual parent meetings to address student and family needs with me as well. And then the rock stars, once again, prior to the actual transition taking place, were able to meet with the Dunbar families for a teacher meet and greet, which was amazing. In terms of the student engagement, there was communication with Mr. Curtis Johnson in regards to how we were going to support after-school sports. At the time, we had a Dunbar football team and a Magnet football team, and I felt like I did not want to kind of minimize the hard work of the Dunbar football team. So we did decide that those 2 teams would be separate entities until the end of the football season. It went for football as well as volleyball at that particular time. We worked hard to kind of establish what would be needed to welcome the Dunbar students. So over the course of 3 days, we made sure that there were desks, laptops, any workbooks, et cetera, that were coming from Dunbar to make sure that everything was ready for that Monday. I also had a meeting with the lead social worker to address the social and emotional supports that would be needed for the students. And I have to also give another shout out to Ms. Rainwater, who has been just an excellent asset in regards to the transitional piece of the Dunbar students. She's been great. I also had a meeting with the Director of Exceptional Student Services to review the students who had individualized IEP education plans. And then there was another meeting with the teacher who works with our ALP students, considered gifted. And then in order to kind of allow people to understand that I wanted the Dunbar community to understand that I consider them now to be my babies, I was able to attend one of their volleyball games, which they won against Bethune. I've not been able to check out a football game because unfortunately, we've had some situations take place where there's been some changes to that schedule. Are there any questions for me in regards to the transition?
No questions.
Sure.
It's something I'll expand on, but I appreciate you just coming up here and just again being transparent about where our shortcomings are. And that's something, as another community comment said, this should be a lesson learned opportunity. And where are we looking back saying, in terms of where did we fail our community, where did we fail to prepare our parents, our community, our students, our teachers, throughout this process, and understanding that we had to act urgently. And I appreciate our team for taking that initiative. As we understand that there are schools where this case could be repeated. Not likely, but there are cases nationally and within our state where we have teacher shortages. It's understanding, well, how can we use this as a lesson learned? So going forward, and just to atone for this case, how are we serving parents? And then I'll follow up with some questions and comments after that, but just thank you for taking ownership and your leadership.
Not a problem at all. And I don't necessarily consider this to be a fail. I just consider the kind of bumps along the way are just kind of learning opportunities. So as you mentioned before, the next time that there's a similar situation, we kind of know how to address it and kind of sidestep those landmines.
And now we're going to turn it over to Ms. Millsaps, and she will share with us looking into the future. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Transition. Oh, sorry. Oh, too far. President Trujillo and Governing Board, Dr. Hagia, members of Cabinet, and all of our community who's listening in and here this evening. Thank you for allowing me to present. I wanted to address the retention and recruitment of staff, and that when I spoke on Friday, is that I take full ownership of the staff that's hired on my campus, and that it's been devastating across our nation, let alone here in Arizona and in Phoenix, that we have a shortage of teachers, and that with all the issues in our society and all the challenges that there are, that teachers are not valued for the work that they do and the impact that they make every single day with the lives that we touch. And so looking at this and the recruitment and knowing that so many of our teachers are coming directly out of the college and universities, that we have this year been able to add to our staff learning acceleration specialists who are working with one of my new teachers and really developing a plan to have student-centered coaching for our teachers in order to grow in their profession and meet the needs of the diverse needs that all of our students bring, and making sure that we are creating teacher leadership and mentorship with our lead teachers in a collaborative setting where teachers are coming together and planning every week in vertical teams, and making sure that our new staff and our veteran staff are supported at a high level. We are also continuing our journey in trauma-informed care. I was very excited today to sit in professional development with our leadership team at across the district and be presented with some ACEs training and additional training that we will all take with all the employees across our district, and moving towards learning more about how to support levels of trauma with not only our students, but within ourselves as adults. And looking at my philosophy is that it takes a village to raise a child. I know that that's very cliche, but it's true. And it's at the core of who I am, that it does take our community and our school and our parents and our families and our staff to work together. And so we are going to continue to develop partnerships with our community. I spoke on Friday that we had created a new partnership with the Loyola project through Brophy for support after school. We are working because we are a community school, and I want to continue to provide resources for all of our students, including the ones that transition to Magnet. We're partnering with Heart for the City for sports after school, Gal Patch to support our girls and their needs, and also different clubs such as art clubs, so that all of our students can still remain and be supported within our community. And excuse me, continuing with our signature as an avid school and creating those systems of best practices to support all of our students with the skills and the knowledge that they need to take their successful transition to high school, college, and career, and create a framework for our teachers to work in. And continuing looking at our tall, skinny school is to continue to grow our pre-K program through 5th grade and allow that opportunity for us to at least have 2 teachers at each grade level, and grow our partnerships with the community in higher ed. It's been a dream of mine to have a teaching school of excellence, and so I have been talking with Dr. Davila Hagigat to partner with some of our universities to see if we could bring professors onto our campus so that they can participate in student teaching in real time with their professors, pushing into the classroom. So not only growing our student teachers, but growing our teachers as well. Any questions for me?
I don't have any questions, but I do just want to express my gratitude to both you and Mr. Walker and the work that you've done and your dedication and commitment to your students and their families and your staff.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll echo what Dr. Vink says, but I also don't have any further questions.
Okay.
Thank you both. I know this has been a really hard decision. Lots of learning moments. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens and how we keep in touch and creating a timeline to make sure we visit this regularly. So that way we don't have that uncertainty, that feeling of when temporary becomes permanent. So I appreciate the explanations, the looking forward. That's all I've got. Anything further, Dr. Hagigat?
No, thank you, Ms. Millsaps. And I too share a lot of gratitude towards my leadership team, my principals. As you shared, this wasn't something that we intended to come in and do at the beginning of the year. It was circumstances that led us here. And so we thank you for that opportunity to share. I will continue to monitor the situation. As a matter of fact, I get weekly updates from Mr. Quintana regarding where our students are and if they're remaining at Magnet. And to date, I'm able to see that every student is enrolled, and I am looking for one student that has not made the transition, and we do not have records, but someone that is very determined. So I will find the family and personally call them and find out what their circumstances are, because that's a concern for me. And so today we ask that you take action and approve the temporary boundaries. It is temporary. I want to make it clear again that this was circumstantial. It was not led by any interest in closing or repurposing or consolidating Dunbar. It was based on circumstances. One question did come up on Friday regarding how do we intend to move into the future with this. And Ms. Millsaps shared that we will receive input and feedback from our 6th and 7th grade families that left Dunbar due to this situation. And we will make plans accordingly so that we are able to continue to grow Dunbar. So I don't have anything to add, just that it is an action item and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have questions, President Trujillo. And this wasn't directed at our principals. Thank you, Principal Walker and Millsaps for your leadership, for the ownership that you've taken. And then again, as just letting you know, just please update us on what kind of support you both need through this transition for you, your staff, and your families. So we know that as a board, we're as supportive as we can be for you all. And then my questions at the district level, how I see that our communication plan is there, but it is a past communication plan on actions we've already taken. So what is our communication plan post September 27th to update our parents at Magnet and Dunbar?
I stay in constant communication with Mr. Walker. And so one of the pieces that he's done really well is have the opportunity to have those case-by-case conversations with our families. I think that right now, one of our goals is to really bring the students together and have that culture. And I don't anticipate having to put anything in the overall to draw any additional attention to what we have. But what we will be doing is connecting with families that may be struggling in one way or another. And so we want to make it very personalized. We want to make sure my commitment from the beginning was to make sure that I'm able to track all of the families that made the transition, not just to Magnet, but to other schools such as Herrera. And so I will continue to do that. If something surfaces and we feel that we need to communicate in a more broad, general way, we will certainly take that opportunity. But I want to also take that lead from Mr. Walker as he finds different needs within his school so that he has that support that we are here asking that we will continue to have for him.
Thank you. And then how are we working to get feedback from parents about how they're feeling, what their status is in terms of how they're feeling about the transition post, and then as we continue to go forward?
We're looking at about, January or so to find out how they're doing. Some of that feedback is coming in as the school is parent-teacher conference, so we are able to get some of that informally. But it's also important for me to send a survey so that we can formally collect not just the feelings, but also what are some of the future plans that they have in mind. We do not want to dismiss the opportunity of students staying at Magnet if they so choose to. We have 6th graders there whose families may choose to stay there for 7th and 8th. And so we want to take all of that under consideration. So I anticipate a survey going out so that we can collect that data formally.
Thank you. And then to Principal Millsaps, if she's here, or to you, Dr. Harrigot, would it be helpful to send, in terms of when we talk about a temporary and sending resources to our community about employment availability at Dunbar, would it be helpful to send those resources to our community so they can support possibly fast tracking a transition to Dunbar, if that is possibly in the future?
We will definitely take advantage of anything that we can to recruit. And as Dr. Diaz had shared earlier, word of mouth and staff or parent satisfaction is one of our #1 strategies. And so I don't see that as not being an option. We want to capitalize on that as well.
Thank you. And then my last is a follow-up to my request last week. I had requested to make a visit to Magnet this week. So I have Friday available. I'm just wondering when that will get.
You are welcome on Friday. We can formalize it right here, right now. I'm not even asking for permission. I know that every school welcomes our board members. And so we look forward to having you at Magnet on Friday.
Thank you.
I have a few requests I was going to bring up at our board requests section, but they are pertaining to this item. I do want to request that a timeline be created regarding this transition as far as a means to have the community know that you are getting weekly updates. Here's the feedback. So my thought with it is it would be posted maybe on both of those schools' websites with the blog areas. I'm not too sure, but so a timeline, just so that way there is some predictability. If we are going to come back to this every few months or something, I think that would be really helpful. And also like an FAQ page built from our principals, like what information would you like shared? So that way that could also be on there as well. If we're not going to prioritize some type of ongoing communication, that should be there at least so it's accessible to parents that, you know, will make time to go look at it and see where we're at on that. I feel like that's the only middle ground without asking for, you know, newsletters or something to go home or to give this responsibility to the PTO. So those are my two requests. And then also to ask you to give a few sentences about the explanation of we are just approving the boundary change. So that way it's in case we get any Dunbar students, we know we can't serve them at Dunbar and they would have to either choose another school or go to Magnet, just so that part is clear on what we're exactly voting on.
Yes, at this time right now, we do not have a middle school at Dunbar, which we did a few weeks back. And so if we have a family move in, they would need to know where their student can be enrolled. And so this temporary boundary change gives us the opportunity to offer that Magnet is right now as part of their boundary. I also want to make sure that we don't confuse. Magnet is still an open enrollment school. And so that was brought up at the last at the study session we had. And so that continues to be the case, but specific to Dunbar, because that is the choice that we made based on these circumstances, that opens up the boundaries to our Dunbar students. And so that's what you are voting on today, that temporary extension of that boundary for Dunbar to the Magnet area.
Thank you very much for the explanation. With that said, do we have a motion to approve our temporary boundary change for Dunbar School 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to attend Magnet Traditional?
Jessica Bueno, a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Alicia Vink, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Miriam, may we please have a roll call vote on this item?
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink.
Aye.
Thank you very much. With that, the motion does pass. I do look forward to discussing this further to be transparent on how this is working out. So thank you all very much. With that, we will move on to item H1 and welcome our wonderful district attorney, Mr. Chris Thomas, up to give us some information on adopting or taking action on getting a resolution regarding the aggregate expenditure limit. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, President Trujillo, members of the board, Dr. Hagigat. You have in front of you, I think, tonight, adoption of resolution that ASBA has put together to try to highlight the issue of the legislature approving an override of the aggregate expenditure limit. And it's an issue that has been hot over the last 18 months or so, but it's also a kind of a complicated one. And wanted to try to shed some light on exactly what the aggregate expenditure limit is, how we got this, and why it's such a big deal, and try to make it real, because I think it does have some major implications, not only for the state of education here in Arizona, but particularly for Phoenix-L. So real quick, I would just say, what is the aggregate expenditure limit? So Basically, it's a limit on how much school districts in the aggregate can spend in a given year. And I guess if you have to equate it to something that maybe it's relatable, every year, and I think we just went through this at the federal level, there is, the debt ceiling. You heard about that. The federal government has appropriated money, but this debt ceiling comes up every so often that they have to extend the debt ceiling in order to spend the money, or the government's going to shut down. Well, it's sort of like Arizona's version of that, but this is based on something that was passed in 1980, which was an attempt to sort of limit property taxes in the state. And what was happening at that time was in 1978, it caused a major ripple around the country. California passed Prop 13. And Prop 13 was a limitation on property taxes that really limited the growth of property taxes in California because the values had gone up so much over the years. And what it did was hurt public services, including education. People in Arizona saw that happening and they said, well, maybe we can come up with something that's not as draconian that would work for us. And because we were such a growing state at the time, what they tried to put into place is something that would allow growth plus inflation and be something, again, that's something we could work with. That's kind of a nutshell of what I just said. What I think is important to note is at the time in 1980, Arizona school funding was 26th in the country. Pretty good. We've been about 50th or there or close to it since about 2000. So definitely important to know. But what was interesting is that through the initiative process, a group of citizens had gotten Arizona's Prop 13 on the ballot for November of 1980. The legislature saw that happening. They got a group of business leaders together and they called a special session, passed in a special election that summer, the aggregate expenditure limit. Then when in November, the initiative came up for a vote, it failed pretty soundly. So what it does is it aggregates all the amounts that are spent from local revenues on education. And what's interesting is it only applies to school districts. It does not apply to charter schools because, of course, we didn't have charter schools in 1980. And it sets a base of 1980, and then you're allowed to grow for inflation plus a factor of 10%. Certain things are excluded from the limit, such as grants or gifts. This was the issue in the Prop 208 case, because Prop 208, when it was passed, basically said that these were grants to school districts. So to try to get around the limit, the Supreme Court ruled, no, they're not grants, that you can't by statute say that something's not part of the Constitution. You'd have to have a constitutional amendment to change that. And that's kind of how it works. It's set on a level of fiscal year 1979, 1980. That's the base. Then there's an adjustment for the growth in student population, adjustment for the cost of living, and then there's a 10% increase adjustment that was passed in 1986. And so that's the limit that we're allowed to spend. And we are, of course, this is the sort of the wonky part of it, how it comes to be. There's a process by which we allocate what that limit's going to be, based on all of those numbers and how it goes through. What's going to happen next in November 1st is the State Board of Education, based on how much all districts are spending. And you just passed the amount that you're going to send to the state about how much you're spending. That's going to get aggregated from all the districts around the state, and they're going to come up and say, here's what the limit is. And it's expected to be $1.3 billion over the aggregate limit. What's going to happen after that is, hopefully what's going to happen after that is that both houses of the legislature by a 2/3 majority vote have to approve overriding that limit. If that does not happen by March 1st, then on March 5th, the State Board of Education notifies all the districts in the state and says that you have to reduce your budgets by a certain amount. And then by April 1st, school districts have to adopt their revised budgets based on those cuts. This is a constitutional provision, so it cannot be changed simply by the legislature passing a law. Ultimately, they would either have to refer something to the voters to change that, or through the initiative process, there'd have to be a constitutional change. one of the things that was hoped for by the legislature acting is to act and actually put something in front of the voters in 24 to change the limit, how it's calculated, maybe even undo the limit altogether because it's sort of an antiquated idea. So that's kind of the background. It's $1.3 billion. I think the hope is that, and why we're in this place. And so just so we know that it's not because Arizona spends too much money on education. As I mentioned already, we're like 49th in the country. But what has happened is because of COVID, there was a loss of student enrollment. A lot of those kids did not come back, certainly didn't come back last year, and they have not fully come back this year. In addition to that, you had growth in the district additional assistance that the state was giving, and Prop 301, which had been treated, it says separate from the limit, is now counted in the limit now because it's no longer voter approved. And that started in June 30th of 21. This is an ongoing problem. It's going to happen every year. So there is now a pressure to possibly either reset this base, expand it for greater exemptions, change it in the Constitution, or make it easier to override. Because that's the big thing that, we're in such a polarized political environment, certainly at the legislature, that getting a 2/3 vote from each house of the legislature on anything is really rare. And on education right now, where everybody has a different idea of how to do it, that's even more difficult. We were able to do it this year, I think, for the leadership of some of the people that are not going to be there this time around next year. So it's really important, I think, that to address it now. There are education groups that are mobilizing right now to try to deal with this before the beginning of the next legislative session, to ask the governor to call upon the legislature in a special session to address it now, so there's not the uncertainty that we have going into this next year. Also, maybe to have a discussion about a referral to permanently fix this so we don't have to deal with this every year. We have gotten this question about, is this a violation of the ARS 15511, which of course prohibits the use of school resources to influence the outcome of an election? It is not, because we're not dealing with an election issue. We're dealing with a legislative issue. And while 15511 does touch on legislation, it only does in one aspect, which is that you can't give material intended to influence legislation to children to take home to influence the parents. That's the only part of legislation that's dealt with in 15511. So you could pass this resolution as a way of sending a message to your representatives and to the legislature that this is important to you, and it's important to the district and the students of the district to sort of to deal with the uncertainty that is in right now, because in this, again, polarizing sort of atmosphere and having a new legislature come in place, not to mention a new governor, we don't know what that's going to look like. And getting 2/3 of a vote of each house of the legislature is not an easy task to do. And districts, I think I should say this other thing is that, $1.3 billion statewide, if you were to have to cut that out of school district budgets in April, you really only have 25% of the year left. So you're having to do this massive cut based on only 25% left of your budget that has to be done in that fiscal year. It's not a cut to the next year. It's a cut to the current fiscal year that you're in. And with 85 to 90% of school district budgets being spent on people and salaries and benefits, that is very, very difficult to do without influencing people's lives. And that sounds like a big advocacy piece. And I'm sorry if that sounded like that. I'm your lawyer. I'm not an advocate anymore, but it's hard to take that hat once you've had that on for 20 some years. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got about this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Thomas, for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, is the State Board of Education appointed or elected?
That's a great question. They are kind of both. They're nominated by the governor to fill certain slots. You have to have a school board member, you have to have somebody from the universities, on and on and on. There's 11 people now on the state board, 11 or 13, I can't remember. But they're nominated by the governor, they're confirmed by the Senate, and then put on there, and they have fixed terms.
I'm grateful for the clarification on what we can and can't do as far as communicating this choice that we're making or bringing for decision. So I know we haven't voted on it. My apologies. Because I hadn't even thought about that. So again, thank you very much for looking out for us. And that was a great presentation. There's some things I didn't know that I thought I knew. So I appreciate the information, Mr. Thomas. Thank you for offering to do this for us.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, in terms of passing it is for me is, this is a no-brainer because yes, the legislative body passed a historic funding amount this past summer, but Prop 208 would have invested way more dollars than what was passed. It would have been way more historic. And so I wonder if Prop 208 would have passed, how much of an investment could we have made into our staff, into their salaries? And it could have possibly we would not have been dealing with teacher shortages, right? We would be able to pay them more and stuff like this, that these are the root causes of why we're dealing with teacher shortages and not being able to staff our schools adequately because we are having to deal with the whims of the legislator and antiquated laws like this and I agree and thank you, Mr. Thomas. And so for me, again, just reiterating, this is a no-brainer because we can't do what we want to do if we don't have the funding. We can't achieve positive student outcomes, serve our community if we don't have that funding. And it's stuff like this that is going to help us be at a better standpoint and not be 50th in the nation in terms of education.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. As soon as I saw it come through, I immediately knew this was something you would want. So that's why I hurried and sent it to Mr. Thomas to review. So thanks for bringing it to the board last year as well, as quick as you did. Other than that, do we want to bring a motion to approve this resolution? Let me read the correct wording. My apologies. Do we have a motion to take possible action on supporting the ASBA resolution regarding the fiscal year 2023 aggregate expenditure limit override?
I motion we approve supporting the ASBA resolution regarding the fiscal year 2023 aggregate expenditure limit override.
I second supporting the ASB resolution.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, may we please have a roll call vote, Ms. Miriam?
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink.
Aye.
With that, our motion passes and we are now on board supporting this ASBA resolution. So thank you all very much. Thank you for still being here with us. Let's see. All right, with that, we'll move on to item H2, board requests.
I do have a request that in our board update, we receive some information about Mr. Carson's request about the autistic resources that he has shared with the district and compared to what we provide and what are our next steps to make sure that we are providing those resources to our community.
Thank you. I would like to echo that request as well. Also, just to further clarify, I do want to request that we do have a timeline regarding the Dunbar magnet transition going forward. So that way there is some predictability around the whole situation. for clarity and transparency purposes. And then also ask that Ms. Jeffries help lead some type of discussion to have an FAQ going on for each of the sick or the just all impacted families at both Dunbar and Magnet. That way, there's just a place for everybody to go. And then I'd also like to request that we look at our HR department and see what it would cost to be as direct and aggressive like Dallas was when they were here, as far as maybe sending Dr. Diaz out to certain hubs to recruit or participate in fairs or just to get a team going of what that looks like. So I hope that, I don't really know all the words to use for that, but I hope that makes sense, Dr. Diaz. And that's it. I don't have anything further. Hearing none, no more board requests. With that, we can move on to item H3, future agenda items. Okay, hearing none. Let's see. We can move on to adjournment. Item I1, do we have a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
Alicia Vink, I'll second.
Thank you both. Hearing no further discussion. Ms. Mayor, may we please have a roll call vote to adjourn our meeting at 7:52 p.m.
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink.
Aye.
Thank you. With that, our motion passes and we thank you all for being here. Our next board meeting is scheduled for October the 18th. That's a Tuesday again at 5:15 p.m. Thank you all and hope you have a good rest of your week.